Let's talk about loops. In this example, we use a template where the last two steps are the steps of work that are performed on a piece of equipment, which is fine when it's pretty straightforward when there's only one piece of equipment. But what happens when, say, you have six pieces of equipment? Well, in that case, the steps 3 and 4 are performed as many times as there are equipment. So then at the end, when you look at the actual step sequence or how it's done, you see that 3 and 4 are done in many loops. So the instruction, when you write it, you would have to specify that it needs to be done 6 times, but only for the last two steps. Well, what happens when you have unknown amount of equipment with those 4 steps? And you know that last two need to be looped. Well, in that case, when you write it as a procedure writer, you would mark it that the last two steps has to be done as many times as there are equipment. Okay, now there's another part of this where there's a summary view, which means that from the steps that are done on the equipment, some of them have to be recorded into the summary. In this example, it's step 4. So in that loop of whether it's one or many pieces of equipment or unknown pieces of equipment, the last two steps keep on looping. However, the last step, number 4, needs to be pulled into a summary view, which is another concept that we're going to talk about. So at the end, there's going to be a report. For now, we're just going to call it summary, where some data is going to be pulled into the summary report. So to recap, there could be an instance when there's one equipment, pretty straightforward. There could be multiple pieces of equipment where the last or specified steps are going to be looping as many times as the writer specifies it. And sometimes there could be a scenario where some of the steps need to be pulled into a summary report, which is an additional concept. We're looking at a template, and some of these steps have been selected to be looped. In this example, what a procedure writer would have to do is to configure this actual loop. So what happens when you click on configure, you have to select one of those options. One is the worker or the field technician going to record how many equipments he found and do those steps, or does the procedure writer specify which equipment this work has to be done on? So for example, if we're going to enter the equipment in this template, then you would select this option and populate how many equipments this has to be done on, and then this loop is configured. Now, in some instances, there's going to be a summary report, which is going to pull a couple of these answers, a couple of these values into a separate report. So if there is a summary report needed, then you do the second part of this loop and you add a summary report. I'm just going to explain you how to do it. And then little icons appear for each step. And basically we're saying, okay, so what I want to do, I want to take whatever the value is going to be entered for this step, and I want to add it into my summary view. So here's a concept for like summary builder, which is basically a table and with a column header, and then we're gonna have to select what's the variable that comes from, where does it come from. So you can connect a bunch of these steps, in this case 1, 2, 3, that are going into summary report. So for as many loops as these steps are going to be done, that's one part. And from those loops, that we're going to pull some of this data into a summary report. So a summary report is just a view that you can give it a name, and then you can also name some of these columns. So for example, I'm going to call it as found, and I'm going to assign a variable that comes from this step. And at that point, I'm pretty much done with the summary review, and it kind of lives as a separate document or a separate report view for whoever's going to review it. And you can also edit it if you want to. You might want to delete it or just change some of the columns. So that's the concept for how loops may have a summary attached to this loop.